After acquiring the Medfield State Hospital property, Lucille Fisher and I started a series of videos, Our Town, Our Land, Our Future, and now we are preparing for the special town meeting to decide on the plan. In this first video, Ross Smythe and I talk about the original mandate that was given to the committee from the Board of Selectmen, and then the goals and objectives that were developed based on that mandate. And we have found over the last 3 years that these goals and objectives have remained very consistent with what we've learned from the town through a series of open forums and surveys. These goals and objectives have been very helpful and valuable to the committee in giving guidance to the scenarios that we've looked at and in how we analyze the impacts that these scenarios will have. We also have a clip from an interview that we did with Steve Nolan about the constraints that the committee is operating under. We have produced this series in order to keep the town and the community informed of our work and of our progress. We're here to really talk about one of the most important issues for the committee, for the planning committee, and that's our mission, goals, and objectives. The selectmen wrote the following statement for the mission of this committee. The overall goal of the committee is to present to the Board of Selectmen a comprehensive and coordinated vision for the sustainable redevelopment and reuse of the former Medfield State Hospital. Now, from that, we've developed a set of goals and objectives, and the theme of this program is to talk about that set of goals and objectives. And I think it's probably one of the most important things that we do at the beginning. It's important because it really integrates and pulls together many things: the values of the community, the multiple stakeholders of people that are interested in the community, the way that we develop options and alternatives for the use of the property, the way that we evaluate those. And we'll talk about this a little bit today, but it involves really a very complicated set of values of the community, of wishes of the community, financial realities of the communities, and evaluating that. But it all has to be done in the context of the goals and objectives that we have set out. What are the goals for the Medfield State Hospital plan? Now, initially, we think that the priority should be on the core campus, which is this area here in the central part. That's because part of the program that we're under is a partnership agreement with the state where we share in the net profits of the property, so that if we meet certain goals and criteria, we can receive 50% up to 75% of the net profit. And those are very time-sensitive goals, so that there is an incentive to do this quickly, to move right ahead. And we think that probably the value, at least in terms of financial gains, will come from what we do with that core campus.
Yep, but when we move forward quickly, the committee is being very careful to be expedient but not foolhardy in their pace. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, good point.
Everyone is being very careful about any decisions that will be made, that none are made in haste. So there's a lot of work done behind the scenes for every decision that's made to make sure that it's been tested and retested, to make sure it's the best decision possible for the town, given the goals and objectives that we've set forth here.
Right, great. So we think that's the initial priority, but it's not all of it, because there's a lot more to the hospital grounds than just the core campus. And in particular, there's, of course, the sledding hill that's down in this area. That is part of the purchase that we made. There's other adjacent properties, such as Hinkley Farm down in this area. And then surrounding the core campus, there are beautiful fields, open space that is going to be transferred to the Department of Conservation and Recreation, but still how those are used. And it's been restricted basically to just agricultural use and passive recreational use. That'll have a big impact in terms of the value, the economic value of the core campus. So we're also trying to keep an eye out for how our development efforts here affects and will be influenced by, will be benefited by this property. The other thing I should mention too is, of course, this is next to the Charles River, which is up in the upper left-hand corner there. And that's under remediation. There's a cleanup effort that's going on there. And there will even be a canoe and kayak launch site that'll be part of it. So it's the whole picture that we're trying to take into consideration in terms of our goals and objectives. So let's just talk a few minutes about what some of those goals and objectives are. And maybe to kick it off, Roz, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the cultural and resource and environmental goals.
Okay. And what, in my mind, I've kind of divided the goals and objectives into the 3 E's: environmental, economic, and aesthetic. Let's pretend aesthetic begins with E. And as you know, each one of these goals in abstract are great goals, but when you try to put them together in one property, there's a certain tension or competition between the goals, and the Master Planning Committee is going to try to work together to come up with a solution that addresses all these desires and needs of the stakeholders of the town and come up with a solution, a compromise, if you will, that addresses all of these issues. Let me go over some of the environmental objectives. One is preserve the natural resources and rural character of the site. As you see, here is the Charles River. Rocky Narrows, which is the first preservation ever put under the stewardship of trustees of reservations, is also right here. Medfield Town Forest, Sherburne Town Forest. This property has a wonderful rural, agricultural, open space feel, and we want to keep that feel no matter what happens to the property. Another thing is this area is riddled with history. The core campus here is registered with the National Historic Trust. It's registered with the Massachusetts Historic District, and it's also registered with the Medfield Historic
Farm, Medfield Farm.
Hold on, it's the Medfield Historic District Commission. And that's because with the central green in the middle of the buildings and the cottage-like architecture that's used surrounding the green, it was the first example of this type of use for a state hospital in the state. And we want to preserve that historical integrity and importance moving forward, no matter what happens. Mm-hmm. We are very aware of the historic importance of this area.
Let me just add too, Roz, that one of the things that I've often thought is very important is the fact that the hospital sits in the middle of an amazing trail system. Mm-hmm. And it may be hard to see that on the in the picture here, but these green dashed lines in here are showing where some of the trails are. And they connect, for example, the one over here connects a trail that goes along the Charles River up in that area. Over here is a road and trail system that connects over to the Dover-Sherborne Regional High School area. So it is strategically in just a beautiful location. The Bay Circuit Trail system that many of you hike or know that goes all around Boston connects into this, and this is part of it. And it actually goes over here to Ice House Road into the community center. So it has a very, it's really connected in many ways to the town.
Yeah, it's kind of a key piece in the puzzle of all this huge swath of open space under different jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. And that actually, Gil, ties into the fact of integrate open space with easy access throughout the site. And The only other, the other place that we really are focusing on is, should something happen in this core campus, we want to establish a sense of place and destination that represents what Medfield is to Medfield residents. There's something about Medfield that makes us different from any other town. And although everyone has a slightly different definition of what it is about Medfield that makes Medfield Medfield, I've read numerous surveys done with residents of the town, and there is a huge appreciation for the public open space throughout the town. And I think that that is also a belief of the people of the town that we want to carry forward as we contemplate a master plan for that area.
I often think in terms of the question of why did I move to Medfield, and what were the values, what were sort of the intrinsic things that that made that decision for us to move here or to stay here. And that's, I think, the question we're trying to ask here is, what is it? What is it that keeps us here?
With this 78 inches of snowfall, I've been asking that question a lot lately.
All right.
All right.
Great.
So now you want to go into some of the economic
Well, yeah, because I think there's sort of two classes, in a sense, of value for this. One is the environmental, resource, aesthetic values. There's also the reality, though, of the financial and economic value. Now, this property, Medfield, of course, is an extremely valuable community to live in, and this property is undoubtedly one of the most attractive, prettiest areas in Medfield, and a very, very valuable site.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think many of us think, and that's one of the goals here, one of the objectives, is housing. And housing is very complicated because there's many different types of demographic groups and segments that we're trying to address. One is, like me, probably, people that would like to downsize and get a smaller piece of property, but still stay in Medfield. We have lots of friends here. We love the town. We love everything that's going on here.
Have kids here.
Have kids, have families. So there's a lot of reasons for doing it. But one of the potentials, because this is a 90-acre lot of land with some 34 buildings on it. Some of those buildings we may be able to reuse and put into housing, can help address that question or that issue about if you're trying to downsize, or you're a senior citizen that wants to have a smaller home. It can help address that need. Also, there's a big need for affordable housing. We have certain goals for that. The property has the potential of addressing a good part of that aspect to it.
Right, and the reason that's also important for people is any contractor or developer who does a 40B development gets to leapfrog over certain restrictions that he or she normally would face. And this often leaves the neighborhood up in arms about what is going to go up in their backyard.
Right.
If we can do this in a planned, organized way that everyone agrees on, we are saving all the other residents huge amounts of angst moving forward.
Right. And one of the things on the economic aspect to it is that we purchased this through a very unique partnership agreement with the state. It's a partnership between the town of Medfield and the state of Massachusetts, in which we share the profit from whatever development takes place. So if we're addressing some of the housing issues or needs for the community, and that's resulting in an economic gain to the town, then to the extent that there is a net profit from that, Medfield gets 50% of the profit, and actually that percentage of the net profit can go up to as high as 75% if we meet certain goals. But those goals are very time sensitive. So we have to meet certain criteria. So there's pressure to do this relatively quickly.
In a timely manner. And the reason that development such as housing is important is that housing will generate revenue for the town, especially if it's housing for empty nesters who aren't going to be drawing on the school system and things like that. And the income the town will make from that will counterbalance any civic municipal uses that we may want to try to also include in this property. For instance, something for the arts or some advanced recreational facilities. we have to somehow bring in enough money from the economic development to pay for any of these other wonderful resources we would like to provide the town.
Yeah. So, for example, one of the things that we can do in the master plan is to set certain criteria in terms of the density of development, so that we can realize this development goals, so it can be profitable to developers to build the types of housing, but at the same time provide enough revenue and income to pay for the original purchase of the property, plus any kind of infrastructure work that we need to do to get it ready for development. So there's an important trade-off really between the sort of public or social goals that we have, like cultural, art centers, that type of thing, and the realities of things like housing. The other thing I should mention too, in terms of just economic value, is the possibility of retail or even commercial development there. Not a big supermarket or not a big shopping center, but retail development that is consistent and fits into the nature of this overall development effort here.
But also, I think, interestingly, when you mentioned retail development, one of our stated goals is to do anything that would work in concept or in concert with downtown Medfield. The last thing we want to do is to develop something here that begins to detract from the momentum and renovation and growth and energy that is coming to downtown Medfield.
Exactly.
We want this to work in concert with, not compete with.
Right. And you can see also in our a set of objectives that there's other values we have in the community, particularly education. That's, you know, when you ask the question to yourself, why did we move here? Well, it can be because our kids went to school here, or our grandkids went to school here, depending on our situation. But there's a lot of educational things that we can do in support of the fine education program that is in Medfield that can enhance that. For example, education, maybe special education for continuing education for, you know, people that are wanting to take art classes or music classes or that type of activity.
It's a wonderful, wonderful piece of property, and right now it's a big question mark. And we have our marching orders from the Board of Selectmen. We have these objectives that we have distilled from the wants and needs of the community that we are trying to balance. And it could become such a great asset to the town.
There are certain constraints and limitations that the committee has to work with, and like we have the LDA, so that's the Land Disposition Agreement, right? And you helped to put that together, actually. Yes. And then we also have a memorandum of agreement with the Mass Historic Commission. So those are just a few of the constraints. So maybe you can talk about those a little bit, and if there anything else that needs to be taken into consideration that we really have to pay attention to.
Okay. Well, this could be a long list, so I'll try to keep it short.
Okay.
But, so, I mean, I think of them in different categories. So if you think about sort of some of the legal constraints, you've mentioned the two key ones in my mind, which is the Memorandum of Understanding with Mass Historic requires us to make an effort to keep the buildings and have them rehabilitated, preserved as part of a disposition plan if we're going to dispose of any of the property. And so the constraint there is that adds an expense. I mean, I do a lot of historic tax credit work in my practice, and I just know that the budgets are always more because there's a lot you have to do to be sensitive to the historic character. There are also some resources like the historic tax credit that help pay for that, but I've heard developers say, you know, it's barely worth it because the cost may be more, the increased cost may be more than the historic credit brings in. So it's a challenge, but one that the Historic District Commission, Mike Taylor, participates in a lot of our meetings, and he's sort of helped to guide us and give us his ideas about the buildings that are most important to preserve. So that's been helpful for us as well. And then the Land Disposition Agreement, the state disposed of this to us under this new model. We in the town of Westboro were the first two towns through the sales partnership model. And the state said, well, we'll sell it to you at a discounted price, but if you sell any of the land, we're going to split the profit with you. So we're cognizant of the fact that if we were to sell it, we'd have to give half the money to the state. So there are various incentives built into that where we can get a little more if we do certain things, which we're looking at. But overall, it's the sharing that's the key concept. But there are also other constraints, just infrastructure for one. The infrastructure up there is decayed. It's rather useless at this point and will have to largely be replaced. Roads will have to be put in if you're going to do any amount of development up there. And then zoning is a constraint. I mentioned we need a 2/3 vote, and a lot of developers, if they were to try to bid on a piece of the property, would want to know that it was permitted for what they want to do or what we're asking them to do. So it's going to be important to get the zoning in place before we try any kind of disposition, so that we can eliminate the uncertainty there. And lastly, the uncertainty itself is a constraint. A lot of the developers, a number of the developers who came to our roundtable said that, well, one of the problems is going to be that if you do parcelize it and just sell some of it, will be the concern, well, what's going to happen with the rest? So trying to articulate a vision for what will happen for the rest at the same time, maintaining our flexibility may be one of our big challenges as well. So there are a lot of constraints up there, so it's tough to navigate through all those to try and come up with a plan that will be workable.
It takes time. You have just watched one of 5 edited videos from past episodes of Our Town, Our Land, Our Future. We want to let you know that you can look forward to 2 brand new videos. The first one will talk about the rationale and the benefits of the final plan. The second will talk about what you can expect at special town meeting. For instance, you'll be voting on the zoning that will support the plan. As a way to stay in touch and informed as to what the Master Planning Committee is doing in this final stage, you can go to our Facebook page, we have a Twitter account, and we have a newsletter that goes out every week. So you can sign up for that through our Facebook or our website. Our website, www.mshvision.net, is a good resource. We hope you've enjoyed this video and the other videos in this series. Thank you.